Chair and members of the Commission, welcome back. We are now proceeding to the next witness. I notice he's already in the witness stand, Mr. Nelson Chamisa. And his lawyer besides him, Advocate Tabani Mpofu.
Advocate, may you stand up? Sure. Which language are you comfortable to use, Advocate? English. If you may state out your full names to the Commission of Inquiry.
Nelson Chamisa, born in Zimbabwe, a happy African, a pure Democrat, and of course, an unadulterated patriot.
Advocate Nelson Chamisa, do you swear that the evidence which you shall lead before this Commission of Inquiry shall be the truth only? If you do so swear, raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
I'm not just going to do the normal swearing because I'm a child of God. I know the meaning of swearing. So my swearing in is going to be premised on holding the Bible, which is the Constitution that defines the makeup of humankind.
It's still the same. You can raise the Bible.
Thank you very much.
Oath administered.
So help me God.
Thank you. You can take a seat.
Advocate Nelson Chamisa, on behalf of the Commission of Inquiry, I would want to thank you for responding to the invitation to come before the Commission. And it's common cause that you are the president of the MDC Alliance. And I believe you saw the letter of invitation from the Commission.
Indeed. Thank you.
There is evidence that has been laid before this Commission to the effect that
But perhaps just a point of order.
To the effect that?
Yes, just a point of order, if you may allow. Before you even go to the detail and substance of what you want to get from me. I have a point to make, Honorable Chair and the distinguished commissioners. I understand that when certain evidence was laid by, in particular, Mr. Matanga, who is the Police Commissioner General, his testimony was covered live on TV. I'm a leader of over 2 million people. What is said by myself is not just a voice from an individual, but a voice from a certain section of the population, the majority, in fact, of the people in Zimbabwe.
Sorry, if I may interject, I think there's a technical fault. Maybe if you...
They must confirm on that one.
Thank you once again. Maybe if I may also advise that it's now coming, it's now the reporting machine that is.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson of the Commission.
Yeah, the TV is now
Thank
okay,
you.
but the recording machine is being attended to. Yes.
It's important. That is very important.
The other part is
It's tough for you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm advised that the recording machine is now working. We may continue. So I don't know if the point of order is still to be.
No, it falls away. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Chair. Thank you.
So before the disturbance, I was about to say evidence has been laid before this commission to the effect that some of the statements you made during your campaign rallies could have had the effect of inciting the violence of August 1. And it is against this background that the commission has invited you so as to give you a chance to respond to the allegations as they saw it fit that it's proper and just that you be given that chance. But it is not a trial. It is just in the spirit of hearing the other side before they come to their conclusion. So on that basis, do you have anything that you would want the commission to know? If so, you may now proceed to tell them.
Thank you very much, Madam, for such a gracious welcome. I also want to thank, in particular, the President, former President of South Africa, President Motlanthe. I'm very glad to see you after a long time, having seen how you have played a pivotal role in the unfolding of historical developments within Zimbabwe. You were seized with matters to do with elections in Zimbabwe as early as 2002. We acknowledge your role, even in the inclusive government. I must say that the role that you played is well articulated and well appreciated. So part of the reason why I'm here in honor of your good works. I'm here in honor of a decorated African icon, whom I believe deserves to be given the honor and respect, particularly in the context of you helping us in this peace-building process, in this nation-building process. I had a lot of reservations, which I will articulate, but I was prepared to set them aside, archive them, and make sure that I put my country first. I put my continent first. So thank you for your good works. You taught us as Africans that it's possible to lead and live like you did in South Africa. And thank you for that. That is the reason why, fundamentally, I'm here to honor you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We appreciate you. I also am here because of the commissioners. I know that reservations have been cast, but I would not want to delve into that. I trust the integrity. I trust the goodwill. I trust the weight upon your shoulders to make sure that you give truth away, you give light to truth. And this is why I'm here, particularly if I'm to also refer to Chief Emeka, who as way back as 2000 was seized with the issues of elections in Zimbabwe in the context of the Commonwealth. You are not new to this. You are not stranger to our circumstances and our situation. And I give due regard and I salute you. Yes, I'm not a soldier, but I give you a salute that is befitting of the role that you have played, and thank you for being here. All the other commissioners whom I respect, the general from Tanzania, I honor generals, especially generals who appreciate the need for democracy in Africa and on the African continent. Thank you, General, for being here. Yes, my fellow learned colleague from the UK, thank you for making your way all the way from the UK. You know, you are far away from the Queen's comfort and harmony, or in Zimbabwe, which is not a joke. It's because of your commitment to our circumstances. And thank you very much for being here. I also want to thank my colleagues, fellow Zimbabweans who are here, Professor Maduku, who also happens to have been my teacher at law. So before my teacher, but in a different context. And I trust that the teacher is not going to mark me like I'm a student, but like I'm a candidate. I also have Professor Manyuroke, again, a lecturer who taught me, by the political color and the political persuasions, Your Excellence, Comrade Chair. Issues of politics is what has brought us here, where people are unnecessarily divided over partisan issues. What we would want to see is to see Zimbabwe that is above partisan politics. Zimbabwe that is above, you know, enclaves of where you come from, what you eat, what you believe in. We must all believe in the collective, which is Zimbabwe. So I want to also honor you, Commissioner Manyeruke. Of course, I know there are issues around party affiliation. That is the right we must all respect. We all went to the liberation struggle so that there is the right to freedom of conscience. So if you choose to go for white when I'm going for a whiter color, that should not be the reason for us to have a division. I also want to acknowledge President of the Law Society, then former President Amanyemba, whom I also cherish. I just thought that I needed to say this because it's important to put into context the fact that the commission that we have would have issues around it, and of course they would be raised, but I have no reason to doubt your integrity going forward in terms of making sure that you give Zimbabweans justice and the justice that they deserve. Honorable Chair and Commissioners, as esteemed, as I come here, I've already indicated that I'm coming here as a representative of the people, as a people's leader. Not just as a people's leader, but as a popularly and by majority elected leader in the political context. I will explain to you why I say so, authoritatively and on firm grounds. But I'm here because I sense that in this context, because of the commission that has been set, democracy is on trial. I have a sense that the will of the people is on trial. I have a sense that our future is on trial. Why do I say that they are on trial? They are on trial because there is a victim who is supposed to be looked after, is being turned into a perpetrator, is being asked to come and answer for the things that were done by people who are now making those allegations. And that makes it a bizarre situation. But I come here because of the honor that I've already indicated, Your Excellency. And I also come here in honor of the deceased, the 6 people who perished. I went to visit some of them before they passed on. And one of them who had a bullet told me that I believe that we are going to cross to Canaan. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I voted for you and I believe in a new Zimbabwe. I said, but were you demonstrating? He said, no, I was not demonstrating. I was actually selling my things. And he told me that the following day he was going to be operated. And guess what? The following day I was told that he had passed on. So this is the reason why I'm here, esteemed commissioners, to come and speak for the voiceless, to come and say something on behalf of the dead. Blood speaks, and blood speaks through others. And I have to come here and speak on their own behalf. Even if I don't know their persuasions, what they believed in, but because they are Zimbabweans, I have a duty as a leader to come and speak on their behalf in the best interest of innocence, in the best interest of justice. Now, some may say, Mr. Chamisa, we want to hear what you say. I'm very clear about what I say. All the times I'm very circumspect. I know that there's a difference between a politician and a statesman, Comrade President. A politician would think about the next election. A statesman would think about the next generation. I'm such a statesman who is thinking about the next generation. I'm not just thinking about an election. For me, elections come and go, but generations are supposed to leave a mark on this earth, a mark in the history and annals of humankind. And this is why, Your Excellency, I'm here. And I'm fortified by one of the icons of this country in the liberation struggle, Joshua Nkabu, who once said that Zimbabwe will never die. It will never die because young people will rescue it. So I'm here because as a young man, carrying the torch of the transformational struggle away from the liberation struggle, I have a duty to make sure that we give sanctity to our liberation struggle by representing ourselves in a manner that will represent the young generation, the Joshua generation, not just in the context of Joshua and Nkomo, but in the biblical context. So we are the Joshua generation. Yes, Joshua Nkomo also said that the trouble and the tragedy of Zimbabwe is that people live in constant fear of their government. That is the situation in our country, where you find that the people can't trust the government can't trust the people. So there's a cat and mouse relationship. I watched Mr. Beatty as I was coming here. He said something about a country and a nation. A country is just a geographical expression. But a nation is about institutions, values, the vision. It's also about citizens and the state. We do not have a proper nation. We have a country. And what we need is to move from just having a country to having a nation. A nation that is premised on love, a nation that is premised on unity, a nation that is premised on harmony. And this is why, honorable commissioners, before the election, I wrote to President Mnangagwa then, but now I would not say President Mnangagwa because I have not acknowledged that is the president of this country. I wrote to him 5 times requesting for a meeting. After assuming the leadership of the MDC upon the passing on of our president, Dr. Richard Morgan Tsvangirai, I felt that it was necessary to create a new dispensation of harmony instead of the old dispensation of acrimony. In any event, Your Excellency, I may wish to just tell you, honorable commissioners, that when we did the November thing in our support on the streets, it was under the understanding that it was going to genuinely bring a new dispensation. President Tsvangirai was convinced that we're going to have a transitional authority. But that did not happen. He was disappointed and he was betrayed because that transitional authority was never put in place to deal with the preparation for an election. So we went to an election in the context of a disputed environment. We tried to put up a document which we called Peace, which was emphasizing the issue of peace, but also a plan for a credible election in Zimbabwe. That plan, we tried to engage President Mnangagwa then, Mr. Mnangagwa now, who did not want to even meet with us. And we said to ourselves, even if he doesn't want to meet with us, we will continue to knock the doors. In fact, they ridiculed our effort because we anticipated that this country is so divided. This country is so divided that it would require all citizens to come together and fashion a common agenda to build the country forward on the basis of peace and also on the basis of harmony. That did not happen, and of course that is why we then proceeded to go to elections. And I have also learned, Honorable Chair and Commissioners, that over the years, in my years of leadership, I have generally come to the conclusion that for a nation to thrive, dishonesty must die. Deception must cease, and tomfoolery must vanish. Such is the case in our circumstances. No nation can ever stand or even survive on the sinews or foundation of lies, falsehoods, deceit, and deception. I have had opportunity to take a look at some of the testimonies. Under oath, a person would lie about things that did happen in broad daylight. Things that are common cause. A person would want to convince commissioners that what is white is black, and what is black is white. That is a serious indictment on the history and the future of our country. And I must say that in as much as I have already indicated the appreciation that I have of the contribution that has been done by President Motlanthe in the context of the government of national unity, allow me also just to indicate to you something that is very important. Where Mr. Chamisa is now being alleged by one witness from what I have checked, and that is the Police Commissioner General. He made some very political statements to say that Mr. Chamisa would have arrested him long back, but we didn't arrest him because we wanted to have him to accept the position in Parliament. And I've said that position is meant for Mr. Mnangagwa, not for Mr. Chamisa. If there is to be an opposition, as I also indicate, this is not just a pontificating position, but a position that is informed by facts, and facts which cannot be negated. Honorable Chair, I've heard disturbing statements from the spokesperson to President Mnangagwa, Mr. Charamba. The spokesperson to Mr. Mnangagwa has made some very dangerous statements. Statements that would almost reduce this commission into almost like a rubber stamp, or a whitewash, or a choreographed assembly of great men of honor and integrity. What did he say in the Herald, which was quite a big story? I think it was on the 20th of November. He had this to say, and I quote, in an interview, Deputy Chief Secretary to the President, Cabinet Comrade Charamba, said, this is a very serious matter, referring to the Motlanthe Commission inquiry. If anyone thinks that this is a ritual by government which has too much foreign currency to give to the commissioners, they are mistaken. We want to make sure that the facts are established, but more critically, we'll have more elections for as long as this country lives as a democratic proposition. If we don't send a clear signal, you don't dabble in violence or trivialize life, it will mean that this thing will continue haunting us. It's a very serious matter. Continued Mr. Charamba. Yes, it's about lives that were lost, but more critical is about lives that are still endangered by the future. The vanguard is mentioned in the commission. There is a counter-narrative to say that they've disbanded it. Meanwhile, Chamisa is certificating them for their superb violence, which draws fatalities. Already, this is the spokesperson to Mr. Mnangagwa. Who is Mr. Mnangagwa? Is the man who has set this commission. So if you are preempting this commission, if you have an answer already, if you have a conclusion already, why even bother? Because it does put a dent and a blemish on the integrity of the commission. And I don't know what is going to be done about this to assure me that this is not going to be just but a rubber stamp, to assure me that this is not going to be but taken as a way of just wasting people's time. Because we need to be assured that indeed this process is going to establish the truth and nothing but the truth. So I just thought I needed to highlight the issue of Comrade Charamba. But not only that, Honorable Commissioners, I also want to know why and how and when Mr. Mnangagwa is going to be invited to this commission. If it is a question of witnesses having mentioned names, like what happened with my name, that Mr. Matanga just mentioned my name, why is Mr. Mnangagwa, who was mentioned by his own general, not also before this house? Why is he not before this commission? Because he was a candidate then. And what criteria has been used to invite me without inviting my brother, ED, as they call him? What is good for the goose is good for the gander. What is good for Nelson must be done to Emerson, so that there is an understanding of fairness in how we do things. Yes, I know that there might be a bit of a problem in terms of him being the president and having appointed a commission. But still, there has to be that narrative from him so that it completes the picture in terms of how and where he was mentioned. Not only that, Honorable Commissioner, I must say that I'm really excited. Bad as it might appear that we've had a situation where we lost innocent lives, we must also understand that it has brought to the fore the fundamental issues that this nation is broken, that our politics is rotten, that violence is at the center of our politics, violence which is institutionalized, election in, election out. We cannot transact an election without violence, particularly violence from the state. And that is the issue that we are confronted with. And that is the issue that we would want to deal with. I must say that it is clear from what I've seen that all the years through, and I will not go into what Mr. Beatty has already given and what others, I will waste your time, Honorable Commissioners. It's very clear history is replete with examples of how we have been victims of violence. I, for one, I was left for dead at the airport, have been attacked by people who are known at the international airport. Can you imagine, Honorable President, having been attacked at Oliver Tambo or Aratambo, and there's not a single person who has been arrested to date? If anything, they're actually trying to cover up that matter. That matter got to the Commonwealth, nothing has been done. I'm just one of the many cases of people who have been arrested, people who have been harassed, and people who have been left for dead. That is the nature of our politics. I was left for dead again on the 11th of March. Mr. Beatty narrated the ordeal. And I must tell you that the person who saved me that day was Professor Maduku. Because when my turn had come to be thrashed and to be thoroughly beaten, Professor Maduku entered. They said, no, let's wait, let's focus on this man whom we must deal with because he has a hot head, referring to Professor Maduku. And the situation was terrible. I sustained serious injuries and I was in hospital for almost like a week. From there, I then had to proceed to Brussels because I was going there for both treatment but also for a parliamentary assignment. And I was attacked at the airport and left for dead. I still have those visible marks which are there. Having been attacked in broad daylight. Nothing was done, guns were used. And this tells you the story of being a Democrat, the story of being a peace-loving patriot, the story of standing for the truth and for the alternative in this country. My story is just one of the many stories, and that's why I'm here, to tell the story of those who cannot tell this story in Mzarabani, those in Cholocho who cannot tell this story. But this is the story of every Zimbabwean. Not a single Zimbabwean has a gun, as far as we know. It is normally the state. It's difficult to hold a gun in this country. Even holding catapults is such a difficult thing. If you have catapult, you will always be tracked and you will be known. And one wonders when they say, MDC, you have guns. We have no gun. The only gun we have had is the Constitution. The Constitution is our gun. That's why we always go to the constitutional platforms to try and articulate and deal with our issues. Honorable Chair, I must say, for the record, my hands are clean. My conscience is very clear. My resolve is unbreakable. And my heart is pure. These hands you see have not spilled blood. These are clean hands. The mouth you see here has never conspired to have a life that is lost on the basis of political violence. I've said that violence is not part of our DNA. And whosoever chooses violence, we always repel. That has been our tradition. And we've stated that we will not walk or swim to State House in a sea of blood. That has been President Tsvangirai's position. That is our position. That is the position of the MDC. But what is the paradox, Honorable Chair? The paradox in all this is that the allegations that are being made by those whose hands are unclean. And why are they doing so? They are doing so as a way of running away from their culpability and their complicity. We have law and order in this country. We have law and order agents and mechanisms in this country. If there is any crime that has been committed, the solution is not to kill, but to arrest. If there is a citizen who has done anything criminal, the duty is for the law and order institutions to arrest and not to do what was done on the 1st of August. So I must indicate this in the context of the 30th of July, because I can tell you that the first time I got to know that there was something untoward in the city was when I was called by the then Home Affairs Minister, Obed Mpofu. And I was shocked because he has never called me for years after the inclusive government. I only used to meet him in the context of the inclusive government. And I said, Mr. Minister, what can I do for you? Because I'm busy in prayer. He says, no, I've called you because I've seen your people who are destroying property at my party. I said, my people? Do I own people? Who are these people? He says, no, I suspect that they are people because I can see they are putting on red. I said, Mr. Mpofu, let me tell you, you are saying they're destroying property. Once a person starts destroying property, is a criminal. You don't need to call me to say that you must restrain your people. Is there something that you are up to? Why would you make such an allegation? What are you trying to do? I had a big scuffle. And he said, look, Mr. Chamisa, we want to talk to you because I've been instructed by my boss. I said, who is your boss? He said, the VP, Chiwenga. I said, what has he instructed you? He said, no, we must talk if there's any problem. I said, I don't talk to people who want violence. I talk to peace-loving people. That's what I was actually joking. You know, he says, no, he's actually here, or because I could hear the voice. I said, no, I don't have anything to do with you. Then I switched the phone off. I was worried at that point that what could be happening. I then tried to check with my youth chairman. I said, what is the problem? Is there a problem in town? He says, there's no problem. And if it can go to the 1st of August and he check on my calls, there was that call from Mpofu. Then I called my youth chairman to say, what is this thing? Is there anything that you are doing? He said, no, we are not doing anything. There's nothing that we are doing here other than that people are just waiting for the results who are doing the part of voter tabulation. I said, fine, that's okay, because somebody called me that there's a problem. Is there a problem in town? He says, not that I'm aware of. I then, at that point in time, checked with a number of people who told me that there were some problems in town, but it was not yet quite serious because the guns, I think, had not been fired and the army was not yet there. But it was clear that I think there was some bit of a problem. What shocked and worried me was that Mr. Mpofu would then call me. If these people were doing whatever they were doing, they were supposed to be arrested because the police were there. But the calling was obviously a choreographed way, with hindsight, of trying then to say, you are responsible, you might have sent those people. But why would we do such things? So I will address that in the context of our issues. Let me go to the 31st of July in context. Honorable Chairman, I really appreciate this platform because this platform gives us an opportunity to just indicate what the people know, what ZEC knows, what Mr. Mnangagwa knows, that we won this election emphatically. Why do I say so? I will tell you the reason why I say we won this election emphatically, because that is what gives me moral comfort. Because further along, we will all know all about it. And further along, we will all know the truth about it. We had the power of voter tabulation. And by midnight, because the presidential election results were counted first before any other result, by midnight the election result was known across the whole country. We also had our own way of ascertaining that result. Mr. Mnangagwa knew the result. And the result was very clear. We're 2.6 million, 2.674 and 32,000 votes. Mr. Mnangagwa at that point at 2,008,639,000 votes. That is the result that we had managed to get on the power of voter tabulation. That is the result that was on the saver of ZEC. My lawyer, who is seated on my right, wrote to ZEC to say we want the results that are on the saver, because we had heard from our own election agent that they were not willing to go to the saver. They had now created an Excel spreadsheet. So they wanted an alternative. This was on a Wednesday, if not Thursday, where they wanted to create a parallel platform where they were now beginning to tabulate the results. But they already had results that had been punched real time. And honorable commissioners, I must say that the strength of our matter when we went to the Constitutional Court, where we wanted to be declared by way of a relief the winners, was because we had a primary evidence on the server. And this is why we issued a subpoena. And I actually have that subpoena, which we did apply for, but the registrar and the Constitutional Court denied the opportunity to us to have the subpoena of this server. I actually have the subpoena here, and it would be important for the commission to just have regard to it. At that level, that subpoena is the one that I was going to subpoena the server and indicate the results that were punched in real time. Now, the server works in this way. If you try to tamper with the server when you have punched in the results, it will freeze. So what then happened was that they could not announce the result from the server because of those issues. We know this because, you know, I've been a minister of ICT. I know how these gadgets work, and I can tell you that this is authoritative, and this is why this is even before the court. Mr. Mnangagwa, in his affidavit, does not deny the issue of the server. He even said that the server was there, but it was tampered with. This is on the court papers, and this is the story which has not been told. So as far as we are concerned, we got 57.10%. Mr. Mnangagwa got 42.10%. The rest was received by other parties that participated. Why is this important? This is so important in the context of any other subsequent developments. Because then we had won the election. We knew that we had managed to bag victory. And it was in the bag. There was no need for us, under those circumstances, to do anything that would then cause unnecessary challenges in the context of our country. I could have gone into how the figures were inflated and the methods that were used. But I don't think that it would really help you. But for whatever it's worth, it must be brought to your attention that there was 4 million ballot papers that were printed, presidential, after the 30th of July. And that can be validated. It's part of our papers and what we have said. And this information is known by Mr. Mnangagwa. Why were these ballot papers being printed? They were being printed because wrong results were going to be announced. ZEC's figures could not tally. There was no tally between the parliamentary and the presidential vote. There were differences in the V11s, which were being altered, by the way, between Tuesday, Wednesday. There was evidence across the whole country of V11 forms that were being altered. There were missing polling stations that were not accounted for, and also there were problems of certain results not being posted outside the polling station as is required by the law. So for us, we're very clear that we had won this election. And whereas Mr. Beatty says we believed, because he used very tenderized language, we won the election and we have it on authority that we won the election. Now, I must also take this opportunity just to highlight that the right to vote is the most important vote. The reason why we went to the liberation struggle was because we wanted to assert that right to vote. And the right to vote is the reason why some of us believe that Operation Restore Legacy was all about the right to vote. And that's why some of us were in the streets. I actually addressed a rally in Highfields in support, having been sent by Dr. Tsvangirai, in solidarity with ZANU-PF. The only thing which confused us was after that successful rally, certain of the ZANU-PF officials were beginning to backtrack on that collective effort. And they were beginning to say that it's a ZANU-PF affair, when in fact we thought that it was a collective national effort that meant to restore democracy in Zimbabwe. Let me go to the 1st of August before I respond to your specific question, Madam. Honorable Commissioners, the 1st of August is a very sad day in the history of our country. Very regrettable for me. But the way I see it, and allow me to see it the way I see it, it was a preemptive measure to avert what they expected to be a response from those whom they had robbed of electoral victory. It was so managed, what I would call a managed explosion as opposed to an unmanaged explosion, calculated to forestall any kind of protest, especially in the context of results that would be doctored or not real. It is very clear when one has regard to the V11 forms changes, the 4 million ballot papers that were printed, and this was all averred in our papers in the courts. And I can tell you that the 1st of August, the way we see it, it was designed to be a platform for the release of a fake result and justify a putative attack on innocent citizens. It's not an accident that the election was the election result. Sorry, Honorable Chair. Thank you very much. I'm just being told that ZBC has again gone on unofficial break. If that may be addressed, Honorable Chair. Yes. Very good. Yeah, not it already. Yeah. Thank you. Ibaba. When we talk about results. Anilka. No. Yaku yamachi. Yeah. Yeah, face of Iripo. It's very important. This is a Yeah, you can. Because of election. Because ndobona kuti zaka ndo mafeti vandidena indasala kutaura maresults aya ndakutaura chokwadi. Or in future. Patangrapa. Indeed. Sure. Thank you, Honorable Chair. I was just making the point that the fake result that would be released was then designed in the context of a putative attack. Why do I say that? It's not just on account of what we've said. If you look at the EU report, for example, which I have here, in terms of their just executive summary, and I may quote a paragraph, the final results as announced by the Electoral Commission contained numerous errors and lacked adequate traceability, transparency, and verifiability. May I just repeat, Honorable Chair? The final results, as announced by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, contained several errors, and lacked adequate traceability, transparency, and verifiability. Finally, the restrictions on the political freedoms and the excessive use of force by security forces and abuses of human rights in the post-election period undermine the corresponding positive aspects during the pre-election campaign. And we so agree. The pre-election campaign had challenges, but they were better than in the previous circumstances. As such, many aspects of the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe failed to meet international standards. This is an EU report. This position is validated by the Commonwealth. This position is validated by the NDIRI report. I could have gone into the nitty-gritties. It's important because what it then does, it speaks to the concerns, anxieties that we had and we always articulated and mentioned. Now, in the context of 1 August, Honorable Chair, Mr. President, it's important to understand that this was done way ahead of the deployment of tanks and water cannons at the MDC headquarters on the 28th of July on a Saturday. One would wonder, a curious mind would want to know, why would you deploy tanks and water cannons at Harvest House and not at ZANU-PF headquarters? These are both political parties that are in an election, but you have already deployed. So you have already worked on a presumption that there's going to be a demonstration on something that is going to come or emanate from one party and not the other. There is no justification. We tried to inquire through our lawyers why that was done. There was no explanation. One would also want to know why, when there was this violence on the 1st of August, certain people attempted to change the cause of death, especially trying to convince the relatives of the deceased that let the cause of death be stab wounds instead of gunshots. Why would that happen? And why would the VP Chiwenga say in an interview on the 5th of August in the Standard, by denying that people had been killed or shot dead, he insisted on the issue of the wounds out of the stabs by knives? Why would we then have, in terms of the attack, just the ZANU-PF headquarters and the ZANU-PF provincial headquarters, where there was no protection? Yes, maybe. But we must understand that why do you then just have that attack on ZANU-PF headquarters and not on any other, including the MDC? It tells you that it's a story that I would say was meant to paint a picture from our perspective. And that's how we see it with the 10 of events, having assessed the situation and having seen what then happened. I also want to say that there was the sending of people who claimed to be soldiers into the high-density suburb. I'm also sure if they were soldiers. But they claimed to be soldiers, and there was actually a statement issued by the European Union and other such international organizations to condemn the brutality, that was being meted out on individual citizens in the high density, in Chitungwiza, in Highfields, in all the areas. One would wonder what was the context of all this. And one would wonder why the election was announced, the election result was announced at night. Why the election result was announced when everyone else was removed from town. And of course, as I'm being advised by my legal practitioner, the election result was not announced as per the law, constituents by constituents. It was just a blanket announcement. I must also say, Mr. President, that there was supposed to be verification and validation of the result by the candidate or the chief election agent of the candidate. That did not happen. In fact, my chief election agent was told to wait in a particular room at HICC, including my legal practitioner. As they were waiting there, they were told that election results were already being announced. And this necessitated my chief election agent to go and take the platform, which was being used by Jecha, and to announce that the results that are being announced are fake and have not been validated. This is all common cause. And I say it because it does tell a story of where we come from and our own perspective in the context of all these developments. Now, I must also take this opportunity to indicate, Honorable President, distinguished commissioners, that the MDC, as a matter of record, and the MDC I'm stating here is the MDC that is in the country, the legitimate one, and I'm its leader. We did not give any instruction to demonstrate on the 1st of August. I want that to be understood. When we make decisions to demonstrate, we are an organized party with organs and structures. We are structured. We don't just wake up and say, go and demonstrate. There have to be meetings. In our own case, we have a National Standing Committee, which is the top leadership, that has to meet and recommend to the National Executive, which is the second organ, then the National Council. So decisions are not made nicodemously or nocturnously. They are made in broad daylight, and we always inform the police. We have demonstrated before, we are going to demonstrate again, as we are going to demonstrate on the 29th of this month. And the reason why we are demonstrating, we know that it is a legal tool, a democratic tool. We are Democrats, we use democratic tools. And demonstrating is one of the constitutionally enshrined democratic tools that we have to use. Just like the Constitutional Court, if we have an appeal in terms of Section 93 and also Section 156 of the Constitution, those are the tools we use to defend our vote. And we said it over and over again, that we will defend our vote. We didn't say you will defend your vote. We said we will defend our vote, meaning to say that we, the leadership, will take a leadership role in defending what we would have voted for through constitutional and legal means. And we have done that, we will do it, and we will continue to do it. Up to today, we are defending that vote. And we will continue to defend the vote because the people voted and the people spoke on the 30th of July. Does the MDC condone violence? We don't condone violence. In fact, in the past, we have disciplined people who have exhibited tendencies of violence within the party, either in settling disputes or other issues. We have tried to then deal with those things. And I can tell you that if we had actually called for a demonstration on the 1st of August, you would not see the few hundreds people you saw. We are a big political party. When we call for a demonstration, it can actually bring the entire of Zimbabwe to a standstill. But we have sparingly called for demonstrations as a way of saying, let us dialogue on these issues. We use it as a way of trying to persuade our colleagues in ZANU-PF to come to the negotiating table, to discuss our national issues, to also try and massage their arrogance, to try and say, let's come together and work forward, work a way forward for the people of this country. Because Zimbabweans have suffered 38 years of suffering, 39 years of suffering. People want to at least have a relief, some kind of a way of going forward. So I must say that in terms of where we are, no one deserves to die on account of omissions by ZEC or commissions by ZANU-PF. This has happened in the past. We did not hope to have that kind of a situation in the context of 1 August. And I must say, I'm so disheartened that up to today, and having listened to the police commissioner, no docket has been opened. A docket to deal with the problems, especially considering that on the 1st of August, the whole CBD was full of police officers. They were supposed to arrest whoever broke the law. They were also supposed to deal with all the people who were there. And then on that basis, you would be able to know the character identity of individuals. The people who were arrested at Harvest House are actually not demonstrators. These are members of staff who were busy doing part of voter tabulation at Harvest House. They were busy working on and the police, when they came to Harvest House, they did not ask for guns. They were not looking for guns. They were searching for computers because they wanted to take all the evidence of our part of voter tabulation. This was on the 2nd of August, I'm sure, if not the end of the 1st of August. So I must say that whereas we had reservations about the process, we were committed to pursuing all the legal means and platforms to make sure that we avoid the situation of having certain forces instrumentalizing protests as a pretext for a clampdown on citizens or on the opposition. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of violence in this country. I think that has been touched upon. Even in my own context, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I've mentioned the point that it was unstrategic for whoever, as a citizen. Of course, they retain their right to demonstrate. But I genuinely believe that it was unstrategic to demonstrate, especially in the context of our victory, which we're just waiting to be confirmed. Section 66A of the Electoral Act allows a parallel voter tabulation to be undertaken. It also allows people to have a collection and a collation of the tallies from the various polling stations. Though it does not allow announcing a result, you can have a kind of a relationship with what you are getting from the various polling stations. Mr. Mnangagwa tried to indicate that after he had seen that I had indicated that we are receiving good news from he tried to copy me. Of course, it's not new. Every time I do something, he copies. And honorable commissioners, I must say that for us, this election were very meticulous. We had an anti-rigging mechanism. That's why we had issues around the printing of the ballot paper and all such other mechanisms that were put in place. So we knew that there was no way our victory was going to be imperiled or violated or negated. All we wanted was just the validation as per the law by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. But this did not happen because the ZEC did not act constitutionally in terms of doing what they were supposed to do. And this is why we thought that by going to the Constitutional Court, we would get relief. But we did not. And such is the nature of the justice system. When you go, you don't win, you don't then leave the truth because you have not won in a Constitutional Court. We still insist on our position because we have impeccable evidence of the situation and what happened. What is the character of the MDC? The MDC is 19 years old. On the 11th of September, we attained the age 19. In these 19 years, we have never held a gun. Not because we do not have capacity, but because we do not believe in the politics of guns. What has torn some of the African states is war. What has torn apart some of the African states is violence. That's why we have taken the high road to peace. With all the consequences, the scars we have, the various graves that we have incurred, we are committed to peace. And this is why you must understand that the MDC at no point did it sponsor, sanction, or even condone violence against anybody. We are victims, particularly in the context of setups and choreograph, wings. Do we have an armed wing? I've met many ridiculous things in my life. But to allege that the MDC is a military wing, and for the Zimbabwe National Army, to even suggest that we could have an army beyond the Zimbabwe National Army, is bizarre. The only army we cherish in this country is the Zimbabwe National Army, which is the People's Army. As MDC, we do not intend to have side shows. The reason why I participated in this election is because I thought that there was a vacancy. A vacancy to be the head of the Zimbabwe Defense Forces. Constitutional. And that's why we participated. We did not participate because we wanted to be the head of Vanguard. Why would we go to an election if we have a Vanguard? Vanguard was just a youth establishment to try and create young people who are disciplined. They are not a military as far as we understand. They were there during the time of President Tsvangirai. When I came in, there was a problem with Kupe and others, internal. And we realized that it was becoming a weakness because people were beginning to blame things on what they call the Vanguard. So we said, we don't want to hear about this anymore. And these are members of the Youth Assembly. Now, Mr. Charamba then makes the point that Mr. Chamisa gave a certificate. Members of the Youth Assembly who were given certificate for being upcoming and young include also some of the members who were in the then Vanguard. It does not mean that we have given Vanguard and it's still an existing structure. It's not. It was just an organized young people who were trying to educate each other on discipline. That's what it is. And you know that if it was something else, the state would have destroyed it. Professor Maduku, you know the competence of our colleagues. They would have managed to flush it out. They would have known by now if they were really the people who were in charge of August 1, and there's no need to then try and manufacture, engineer evidence and do all sorts of things, do setups. By now we would be having people who are arrested, who would have been arrested. Our police force is one of the best. I'm proud of our police force. When they do their work without political interference, you will be shocked. I'm proud of our armed forces. When there's no political interference, they are one of the best armies in the whole world. And such is the confidence we have in them. So at no point would we cast aspersions on a people's army, because the Zimbabwe National Army is a people's army, our national army, and would want the best from our army because they are there to protect us and to make sure that they are the protectors of the people as we move. Allow me, as I seek to conclude so that I don't waste a lot of your time, perhaps I would give you more time in questions, to say, does the MDC even harbor having a security wing? We do not want it, even forced security. We do not want them. We have said we do not want any kind of a thing that would be misconstrued to be something else. That's why our young people are the ones, as marshals, who always provide our security, even at demonstrations, at public meetings, in the interest of peace. We believe in democracy, not thugocracy. Honorable Commissioner, what do I mean by thugocracy? A rule by thugs. People who are in the habit of using thuggery to persuade or coerce people into a particular action. It's a political science term. Dr. Mancheruke, you do know this. We are not a thugocratic party. We are a democratic party. That's why our name is Movement for Democratic Change. And we've always said we insist on the politics leading the gun and not the gun leading politics, which we believe is becoming a problem in this country. We have said that the politics of this country must be the politics of the ballot, not the politics of the bullet. And it must not be about whoever has keys to the armory, but whoever has keys to the hearts of many Zimbabweans. So yes, I went to this election to be given a constitutional mandate. There's been a dispute on this election. We verily know that the power of a nation and a state comes from the people. Legislative authority comes from the people. Judicial authority comes from the people. Executive authority comes from the people. That's why we went to the people. We ran the risk, Honorable Commissioner, of elections being emptied of their meaning in this country, where people participate in elections but they know that there's going to be a predetermined outcome. That kills democracy. That is a threat to democracy. So we hope that this commission will restore the integrity of electoral processes. Over and above the issue of making sure that violence will not rear its ugly head ever again, particularly state-sponsored violence. And also ZEC would make sure that they respect the Constitution, because they did not respect the Constitution. And our biggest problem in this country are state institutions which are not respecting the Constitution. So we have constitutions without constitutionalism. And that is where we must be going. Going forward, there are fundamental questions being asked in the country. Yes, we've had a commission for the sad and tragic death of the 6 Zimbabweans. One life lost is far too precious. But one is asking, what about the 20,000 people who perished in Matabeleland? These are some of the questions people are asking, because we must have a holistic approach to the issues as we go forward. And these are questions that must be answered. Yes, we need to do justice for the 6. We also need to do justice around the role of our military and the army in this country. Let our army be confined to the barracks. Let there be a respect and honor to our military in the proper context, just like other modern democracies. We must de-villagize our military and demilitarize our villages. We must make sure that our military is the badge of honor, because to serve in the military is the most important of honors for any citizen. But to be able to do that, we must restore full democracy. And full democracy on the basis of what we fought for: one man, one vote during the liberation struggle. I so rest my case, Honorable Commissioners. If there are any questions, I'm ready to answer any questions. I've had to truncate my submission because I realize that time is of essence, and I need to make sure I also do justice to you. I know you've been working the whole day. Mr. Beatty was long. I realized that he was there for almost 3 hours. I'm sure he did the bit on my behalf. I've already made that in the context of Charam. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the detailed narration. Maybe before handing you over to the commissioners, if I may also inform you that certain videos of campaign rallies were watched by the commission.
Sure.
Where the statement, the Jecha Musadza statement, would you want to comment on that? The Achidira Jecha Musadza.
Achidira Jecha Musadza?
Yes. Certain,
okay.
Yes, if you would comment on that.
Well, before I answer, I just want to appreciate your understanding of that, so that I can give you a very comprehensive answer.
Yeah, we have been made to understand that it's like spoiling the party. That's the loose translation that.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm just saying this because we want to contextualize things. And I don't want to be given vague and embarrassing questions. I want questions that are valid, and so that I give you valid answers.
It was not was not a question actually.
Yes.
I was simply advising you that certain videos
Sure.
where this statement was made were shown to the commission. If you want to comment on that,
Sure.
it's not a question actually.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes.
No, I appreciate that they watched some of the rallies. I'm very honored. Thank you very much. And I hope that they appreciated how excellent our campaign was. Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioners. But I hope it will come as a question so that I'm able to answer it.
I will now hand you over to the commission. Honorable Chair and members of the
Just
commission.
maybe to do justice.
No questions.
Sorry, just to do justice to you, because you said it's not a question, but I think it's fair for me to contextualize that perhaps your understanding was not properly located in what I had said. If you look at the Jecha Musadza context, it was in the context of making sure that sorry? Oh, it's okay.
Send in Sadza. Pourings.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. It does not say that the right of violence so on, it does not give people the right to shoot people in the face.
No, of course, yes. Of course. Well, this statement is very clear. This statement does not say to people, be violent on a particular day, in particular on the 1st of August. It does also not say that be violent to the extent of shooting people. I don't take this to say I'm the one who incited those who used guns to then kill people, because I have no capacity to incite any soldier, especially to be violent or to use violence against any citizen. So whatever statement I made is almost like the Bora Msango statement. Now what do you say?
Bora Msango statement, meaning you can vote for another candidate, not the candidate for that party.
Okay.
Well, if I may also... If I may also say, it's almost like the statement "Idipe." What does it mean?
Idipe, meaning ED will get in power. Without doubt, resoundingly. So it's a slogan.
So, I want to just say that the Jecha Musadza, Sadza is supposed to be a finished product. Now, you can't say that we will put send in the Sadza, to use your language, when the Sadza has not been prepared. You only are able to then put the send in the Sadza post a declaration of a false result. That is the context. So we could not have done anything before the announcement of the result. We could only do something after the announcement of the result. And what we did is constitutional. We have continued to do that. That's why we went to the Constitutional Court. What did we do to put send in the Sadza? We delayed the inauguration of Mr. Mnangagwa. That is putting send in the Sadza. What is putting send in the Sadza? We have confused Mr. Mnangagwa's plan to have an elaborate scheme of rigging the election, to the extent that up to today, if you were to whisper to him, well, how many votes did you get? He will say, I was declared by the Constitutional Court. He did not win the election. That is the sand in the sadza. And we are very clear about that. Sand in the sadza is to make sure that you will not have it your way if you rig an election. It was conditional upon declaring a false result. And what we did after the declaration of a false result is there for all to see. We went to the Constitutional Court. We are in the African Court even now. We are even continuing to talk about political dialogue. We are engaging the international community to say the election in Zimbabwe is disputed. Something is rotten in Denmark. In this case, something is rotten in Harare in Zimbabwe. That is our position.
Sorry, like I had indicated, Chair, I no longer have any questions.
Thank you very much, Chamisa, for your presentation. I will now ask my fellow commissioners if they have any clarity-seeking questions.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nelson Chamisa, for your thank you very much, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, for your eloquent presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
It was a great pleasure listening to you.
Thank you, Doctor.
I have a few points that I would want you to clarify.
Sure.
I think mostly in terms of meaning.
Sure.
The first one was made on the 9th of June 2018.
Sure.
Where I think listening to the videos like we did, you alluded to the fact that if Emerson is to get 20% of the vote, then the whole country should be set on fire. Is it what could be your translation?
Well, I'm not so sure
to that.
No, it's a false premise, and it's a false question. Because I'm not so sure where you got it. I would never say such a thing. To talk about setting the whole country on fire. If anything in the context of percentages, I've said, if Mr. Mnangagwa gets that percentage, I would give him my sister. That I've said. But to say that the whole country will be set on fire, what kind of fire?
That is what I wanted to understand.
Well, I don't know the context of that. Perhaps you got a doctored evidence. I'm not so sure what evidence you are using, but I would have wanted. That's why I've said to the Commission, please favor me with the statements that are alleged to have been said by myself. You have been my lecturer. You know that I'm not that stupid. I'm sure you know that. I would not say such stupid statement. And they would have arrested me. They would have arrested me. Or they would have summoned me to just say, Mr. Chamisa, I have said something. Because they've done it in the past. But that was never said, and that will never be said by myself.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. The other aspect that requires clarification is that there is another one we watched where...
in fact, on that one, Dr. Manyeruki, I just want to say, on the contrary, statements that should have caught your eye and your imagination are statements from Ungwe, the former governor, who said that soldiers will shoot people if ED loses. And that's what happened. Mukupe, who is a senior official who is the former Deputy Minister of Finance, also said that Chamisa, the soldiers will not allow Chamisa to be a head of state in this country. They will do whatever it takes to make sure that this will be done. Now, to then say, Mr. Chamisa, you said that the whole country will be set on fire. Was the whole country set on fire after the announcement of the election? If the whole country was set on fire before the announcement of the election, it had nothing to do with me because I only spoke in the context of the announced election result.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Sure. The other issue would have been where they seem to, I mean, you seem to have said that there would be more demonstrations.
Yes.
And that I mean, if there would be any resistance, I mean, you'd shut the whole country down. What I'm looking for is probably the interpretation of that.
Dr. Manyeruke, you don't even need any interpretation. I'm armed with this constitution, and I must read for the benefit of our great commissioners. Section 59. Every person has the right to demonstrate and present petitions, but these rights have to be exercised peacefully. Every person includes you and me. We can demonstrate, both of us, if we have anything we are not happy about. It's allowed as per the Constitution. So demonstrating is not a problem. Demonstrating and demonstrating is a problem. I also want you to go to section 67. Because I'm a lawyer, so I want to make sure that the law is always covering me. I would never utter a statement that I know at law is not going to be defensible. And I'm also one of the finest lawyers in the country. The man to my right. It's known by, that's why my colleagues always also want his services. Because he's one of the finest lawyers. Section 67. Subsection 3. In fact, subsection 2, 2D, paragraph D. Subject to this constitution, every Zimbabwean, and that includes Mr. Chamisa, that includes MDC people, that includes ZANU-PF people, every Zimbabwean citizen has the right, D, to participate individually or collectively in gatherings or groups in any other manner in peaceful activities to influence, challenge, or support policies of government or any political or whatever cause. Our cause is political, and we will always use this constitution to advance that cause. I listened to Mr. Mnangagwa over the weekend. He knows that the constitution does allow us. You are saying, Mr. Chamisa, I've given you democracy, you are abusing it. I said, you are not Father Christmas. Democracy is given by the constitution.
Advocates for that clarification.
You are special.
Maybe I could ask. Advocate Chamisa, thank you very much for the respect you gave to the Commission.
Sure.
We are humbled by that. My question is, on the 1st of August, there were demonstrations.
Indeed.
What would you think was the cause of the demonstrations?
Well, it's very difficult for me to speculate, Madam President. It's very difficult. I can't speculate. If it was ours, I would have told you that the reason why we demonstrate was because of 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would have told you that you would not even ask. You would have seen a sea of red in the city. You would have seen ourselves as leadership. We don't do things where we are not leading from the front. We do not believe in that kind of leadership. But just to emphasize that, I would know what the cause is. But I've already articulated in my submissions that I would only guess that perhaps it was a well choreographed thing to try and create a platform for destabilizing the announcement of a result. Because we were winners. Why would we want anything that disturbs the announcement? And frankly speaking, I was actually not in the citizen. I was somewhere where I was doing my issues to do with faith. And I have the reasonable confidence that this election, it was just a question of time. We're just waiting for announcements. And at that point, Mr. Mnangagwa was sending emissaries to me to say, let's talk. But I was saying we'll only talk after the announcement of the result. I was looking for you because I was clear that we have won. And he now wants to kiss me because I've managed to win. I said, we wanted a hug and a kiss before. You turned it down. Now let's wait for the result. We will then discuss after the result. And you will see that he actually sent a tweet to that effect that he has been trying to get in touch with me.
The demonstrators themselves, according to evidence that is available, were putting on the MDC regalia, and they had T-shirts printed your name.
Sure.
And they were chanting slogans, we want Chamisa. And they were also saying our vote has been stolen. Would you allude those to have been members of any other political party other than MDC?
Well, first thing, leaders don't choose supporters. Supporters choose leaders. So I wouldn't know who support. Mr. Mugabe, for example, shockingly said on television that he was going to vote for me. But I was so shocked because I didn't expect to have that kind of a vote. But I could not run away from the vote because you don't choose voters. Voters choose you as a leader. So for me to know who was in town, who was demonstrating, and they were saying, we believe in Chamisa, it might have been even people who were genuinely believing that because there were two major candidates, Mr. Mnangagwa and Mr. Chamisa. And in Harare, if you drop a stone, 98% you hit an MDC supporter. It's a fact, it's known. So I wouldn't know, somebody who sympathizes with the MDC. But I wouldn't know who was there, who was protesting or who was demonstrating. Those who were demonstrating and protesting were not doing so at the instruction of the MDC or at the instruction of its president or at the instruction of its organs. If anything, we're all preoccupied with making sure that we have all the V11s in place. We have also validated our para voter tabulation, which we already had, but we wanted them to see the proper V11 in the various polling stations. So the center of focus was polling station, not the CBD. But the CBD was not in any way going to help us in making sure that we would get the security of the result and the security of the vote. I'm sure you're answered, madam.
I'm answered. But just one question. If we say these people were not MDC supporters, why, maybe just clarify, why would you think ZANU-PF supporters would then go and destroy their party premises, go and destroy their cars?
Well, I would say it might not have been ZANU-PF. It might have been people sent by other individual forces who wanted to justify instability, to justify the killing of innocent people for a broader strategy, which I don't know what it was. But the bottom line is that I would not authoritatively say that these were MDC supporters. And just also say, well, look, I would not choose to define or confine your mind. But I think in asking the question about demonstrators, you must also ask about the killers. To say, in as much as we're demonstrators, demonstrators are supposed to be dealt with in terms of the law. If they broke the law, they must be arrested. But you must also, they must not be killed. Life is so sacrosanct, it's precious. And I think the center of focus, if we are to honor those who died, is to say who killed those who died. Including women who were shot in the back. It was not even a frontal. attack. It was in the back to show that they were actually running away. And just as a matter of fact, Madam President of the Law Society then, I can tell you this, not a single MDC supporter, as we know in the structure, was part of the victims. These were innocent people who were just in the city center, who were indiscriminately shot at. Assuming that it was MDC, as I have heard from certain people who want to advance theories, why would MDC hire people, bring demonstrators, shoot at them, kill them? To achieve what? Honestly, for what? We have never used the blood as the fuel to drive us. And we will never use blood as a reason to be in power. Never. That will not happen. I can tell you, not just as a politician, but as a man of faith. That's why I use the Bible. Because one other thing you must know is that I am a man of my faith, the Christian faith. And I'm not ashamed of it. When I say I believe in this word, I believe in the word. I don't believe in spilling blood. I don't believe in killing. I don't believe in violence. It is against my faith as it is against my creed, as it is against my beliefs. I don't believe in this.
I have no further questions. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, let the chief go first. Chief, we'll go to chief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chamisa.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary.
This is my first time of seeing you in person.
Oh, thank you.
So I'd like to thank you for the eloquence with which you spoke.
Thank you. Well, this is not my first time to see you. I've always seen you around. You are a great man of Africa, and thank you for being part of this panel.
Thank you very much. One of the most impressive things you said was about MDC being a party that respects the law.
Indeed.
And always acts in the course of law.
Sure.
I take it that now that the Constitutional Court has made a pronouncement that in keeping with MDC's loyalty to law, that you will accept the pronouncement of the constitutional law. And in that context, I was also very impressed by what you said about being ready for dialogue. Did I understand you correctly to say that MDC and you personally as the leader of MDC are ready for dialogue in order to heal the nation?
In fact, we have made a resolution, Honorable Secretary General, to say for Zimbabwe to move forward. We have an African saying that says, Zvanza zinogezana.
Contradiction in saying that you are an extremely law-abiding party, but at the same time does not respect the pronouncement of the Constitutional Court.
We respect the pronouncement of the Constitutional Court. In fact, as an advocate, I'm an officer of the court. But the Constitutional Court is a court of law and a court of justice. It is not a court of politics. Politics is about legitimacy. And our contention is based on legitimacy. We have the right to say that, Mr. Mnangagwa, you are not legitimate because of the result we have. Yes, we acknowledge the Constitutional Court. Yes, we have taken note of the verdict. But we also have the right to disagree with the court because it's allowed, it's permissible. It does not subtract from our rule of law instincts and our rule of law character. We continue to be so. But we have a legitimate issue arising out of an election result, which we know by fact and by truth that it did not give Mr. Mnangagwa victory. And I've heard this thing to say, but How did Mr. Mnangagwa's party get 2/3? And your party did not get 2/3. Even if you look at the vote, a lot of the people who voted for me were voting for ZANU-PF at parliamentary level in some cases, but they would vote for me in the presidential. So the tally of the presidential, we had more votes than Mr. Mnangagwa, who had half the vote to the vote of his parliamentarians, even by the results that are there.
Wouldn't you agree that internationally, that the pronouncement of the highest court in any land is to be respected and accepted by everyone who is law-abiding?
Well, it has to be honored, it has to be respected. That's why we have said the Constitutional Court has ruled. We acknowledge their decision, but we still have political legitimate issues that have to be resolved. And they can only be resolved through what you have already alluded to, the issue of political dialogue. And that's why we have insisted that political dialogue is the way forward. And we have put on the table a 5-point plan. This is not the first time that there's been political dialogue in this country, especially where there's a disjuncture between the path of law and the path of the reality and the facts on the ground. We need to bring the two together. Honorable President Motlane, you know how you helped us in Pretoria to try and broker an understanding of how to get out of such a political imbroglio or political situation. That is what we are saying. Going forward, we must be able to resolve the legitimate issues away from the courts. We must be able to resolve issues of reforms that are comprehensive so that we don't have a repeat and a recurrence of disputes of elections year in, year out. Every election cycle, we are reproducing a vicious cycle of negative politics. We want to deal with that. Let us have a path to nation building, a path to peace building. That is what we have put on the table. Mr. Mnangagwa doesn't seem to have appetite for it. And that's why we are saying we will then use democratic tools to make sure that we bring him to the negotiating table to resolve the political legitimacy issue. Such is our trajectory.
Well, my last comment and question is, being a very distinguished lawyer as you are, and as I have read all about you,
thank you.
You will agree that the harmony in any country depends on acceptance and respect for the separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary.
Indeed.
And countries work best when this separation of powers is accepted and respected. And so in that context, given that the highest court of the land has made a pronouncement, I would have thought that you will agree that for harmony in the country, that the pronouncement of the highest court should be accepted and respected by everyone. And of course, the point you make about dialogue can take place and should take place probably, but all within the context of acceptance and respect for the pronouncement of the highest court.
Harmony starts with the truth. Harmony starts with the reality. Harmony starts with the state, honoring and respecting that there should be no state-party conflation, the conflation of the party and the state, and the attempt to influence the state and its organs. Those are fundamental issues that would then require a political reform agenda and a constitutional reform agenda. And that is what we have put on the table. If anything, Mr. Mnangagwa must count himself lucky, Honorable Chair, that he has such a young Zimbabwean who is peace-loving. If I were a trigger-happy young man, there would be a problem in this country. But I've tried to be circumspect, careful, and very careful in what I do, what I say, to keep this country intact. I thought you were going to be congratulating me.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if you what you say you've just described yourself as, because when I had the pleasure of meeting Morgan Tsvangirai in 1998, I formed a very good impression of him.
Sure, thank
And
you.
if you are determined to work on his footpath,
Sure.
you should be as good and I hope as mature as he was.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Just to also say that from what you have said, it is important to understand that it's not possible for the one who claims to be the winner to get the losers consent by force.
Yes, please. Advocate Chamisa, thank you very much. It's been a great honor to have sat here and listened to your testimony today. I wanted to just ask one or two things. Firstly, going back to right at the beginning, you said you actually saw one of the people who'd been shot the next day.
Indeed.
On the 2nd of August.
Indeed.
Where was that? Was that in hospital?
Oh, thank you, Advocate Dixon. It was at a hospital because I visited the victims. I went to the hospital before addressing a press conference where I was then calling for peace and harmony. I wanted to have an on-spot assessment of the issues. So I went to the hospital at Parenyatwa. I saw the injured. They told me horrendous stories. And all the stories they told me that they had had an encounter with the soldiers. And they were not even demonstrating. I went to CSU where I also met tens of people who were injured on account of what had happened. I actually had to come back to visit this. This was, I think, the following day after the problem. Then I addressed the press conference soon after.
Did this person, because obviously we're trying to get evidence of what happened, did this person tell you anything about how they'd been shot? The one who you saw, who then you say died later?
Well, I didn't go into the details. I was really heartbroken. He just told me that his special organ had actually been ripped apart and the bullet was still inside. And I could see that the engine was totally destroyed. And I was really worried that, it was a very sad and a sorry sight. So I didn't go into further details, other than the fact that he was very optimistic. He was actually saying that, I'm going to theater, but please come and see me. They want to remove the bullet. The next thing I was told that person had died, because I then wanted to make a follow-up just to go and check how they were doing.
And when you got the call the day before from the Home Affairs Minister, this is on the 1st of August,
yes.
At that point you said you realized there were some problems brewing.
Indeed.
Was there anything that you thought at that stage you could have done maybe to intervene, to stop that situation?
Well, Mr. Dixon, at that stage, like I told you, the only effort I could do was to try and raise the Youth Assembly chairperson, to check if there was an issue. There was nothing as far as they were concerned. So there was nothing that I could do. In fact, I was actually far away. He asked me, where exactly are you, Mr. Chamisa? And I told him that I'm actually out of Harare in Dombosha. He said, oh, really? Okay, that's fine. And that is evidence that is available. There was nothing that I could do because I didn't know what was happening, who was doing. And I thought that perhaps he was just trying to pull something so that I would then be invited to a dialogue. Because at that point in time, I was under the impression that they want to bribe me into something to say, please, because they also said, but why is Chamisa giving us problems? Why can't we just give him money? How much does he want so that he'll be quiet? So I was very cautious of calls that would come from across the other side. And I must be frank on that.
Now, I know you say you weren't in Harare on that day, the 1st of August. But are you able to assist at all? I mean, do you think there were people on that day who thought that the results were being cooked up or that there was going to be a fake result?
Well, I'm also sure, but I think the whole nation was anxious. The whole nation was armed with what has happened in the past. I'm sure Professor Maduku would also be equally worried. because the issue of elections in 2008, when results were withheld, would bring some kind of nostalgia and deja vu on the people of Zimbabwe. That, look, perhaps this is now a repeat of what we've seen before, where results, people knew, because people voted, and people know that the result at a polling station had been concluded the very same day. But the election was not announced on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, only to be announced on Friday at night. Now, I know my colleagues in ZANU-PF, if they had won the election, it was going to be announced midnight on Monday, and they were going to be celebrating, but they knew the result. That's why they took so much time to try and think otherwise. I know of a very honorable member who had to sleep with their shoes on because of this result. But I wouldn't want to go there because it's not necessary. No.
Just one last matter. You mentioned the army and the police in your assessment being very professional.
Sure. Sorry?
I said you mentioned the army and the police in your view generally being very professional.
Without politics.
That's what I was going to say, without the intervention of politics.
Sure.
Is there anything that you can help us with as to what recommendations we may be able to consider on that particular issue? What steps could be taken in the future?
Well, thank you, Mr. Dixon, for that question. In fact, the first thing we must do is to remove our military from civilian politics, so that we honor our military as our military. The second thing we must do is to make sure that our Zimbabwe National Army moves away from campaigning for a political party and starts campaigning for Zimbabwe, having nothing to do with political parties. Because at the end of the day, political parties have different persuasions, but they all are fighting, not as an anti-state effort, but to make sure that they reconstitute and transform the state. So I would really urge our colleagues, because I know that in the previous election, some of the serving members of our esteemed state institutions were actually campaigning for my colleague E.D. Now, that is a problem. When soldiers campaign for one political party, when we all are supposed to have the equal protection and the security to our sovereignty, because we as the people are the state, and that includes MDC and ZANU-PF. So moving away from partisan politics would be a very important thing.
Thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
Advocate, I really want to acknowledge with a lot of respect your recommendations.
Sure.
On the way forward.
Sure.
On that way forward, I'm wondering if you have also considered the issue of abuse of women and violence against women that we took note during the election campaign period. And would it be an issue that you would want to speak on with regards to the recommendations and going forward as a country?
Thank you, Doctor. Women are such an important force, but they are also such an important voice. But in this country, there has been a scant regard of women and their vote. And the greatest form of violence against a woman or women or any citizen is to disregard their vote, as has happened in this case. So in order for us to be able to resolve issues going forward, we need to respect the dignity of the woman by allowing more women to be active in politics away from violence sponsored by either the state or by politicians. And it's very important for a lot of political education to go into our politics. And this is why when I assumed the presidency in my party, I had wanted to meet Mr. Mnangagwa to have ground rules so that we have do's and don'ts. We don't repeat what Mugabe used to do to Mr. Tsvangirai, where he would do, attack Mr. Tsvangirai, where he would victimize Mr. Tsvangirai. I wanted to agree with Mr. Mnangagwa to say, let's have a political fight, but beyond the fight, let's build our country. Nobody is going to build a country single-handedly. We can build our country together. I'm a young man, but I have a very mature heart. A mature heart to bring this country forward. To bring this country together and move it forward. That is what I've always said. And once we do that, I can tell you that we will have more beautiful flowers blossoming in the garden of our country by way of more women in politics.
Thank you very much, Advocate.
Thank you once again, Advocate, for your testimony. I just want to pick your brain with regards to the electoral system, because I'm aware that post the experience of 2008 elections,
Sure.
There was an agreement that results would be declared within a timeline of 5 days.
5 days, yes.
How do you suggest that should be reduced, particularly with regards to the presidential elections? Because as you correctly point out, actual results are determined at the polling station.
Sure.
The rest is really addition and collation and tallying. So would perhaps an electronic transmission of same cut that timeline shorter?
Sure.
I know that, having had the experience of having to wait a longish period, 5 days appeared quite reasonable then. But if today that's just too long, I want you to suggest how that process can be short-circuited.
Well, I would say, thank you, Honorable President. I think going biometric would be a good solution in terms of the collation of results and validation of results. It would be a good solution on account of the systems having been agreed upon by all the stakeholders, perhaps through a multi-party liaison platform, which platform was not active, by the way, in the previous election. So I suggest that would be one way forward. Another way forward would be to also make sure that we get our army out of verification and validation of the results or participation in electoral results. I think they must just be given the outcome so that we don't have the selectorate replacing the electorate. When I say the selectorate, I mean the securocrats in particular. They are supposed to simply respect what the people would have voted for, not massage it, not seek to change it, or marinate it for certain of the objectives. Thank you, Honorable President. I'm sure I did justice to your question. It's very difficult to do justice to Mr. President's question, but
thank you once again. We will, as a commission in our report, try and make specific recommendations with regards to the electoral system. And hopefully that would shorten the waiting period. But once again, we are honored to have you, sir, and with no further questions, you may step down. Thank you for coming.
thank you very much. We hope to also provide some DVDs that are going to be very useful, especially just articulating, I've heard that there's a problem, Honorable President, in understanding when we say that we are going to defend the vote. Defending the vote for us is about the integrity of that vote. the sanctity of that vote, and it's a constitutional provision. So we also provide DVDs to contextualize some of our submissions to the Commission. But I must say, the misgivings we have of the Commission, we hope are wrong, because we trust the integrity of commissioners in terms of the final product to help Zimbabweans move forward. We have suffered a lot, and we really want to find an answer and finality to the problems affecting our people. And for us to be able to do this, this commission will be very useful in giving markers and indications of how this is going to be done. And I want to thank you for your time. We don't take it lightly. I know that you have had to fly all the way from South Africa today in time for this. Well, but the effort has to be appreciated, Honorable President. I also want to appreciate Chief. It's not very easy for the Chief to leave the subject to come and preside over such an important. We really appreciate the Zimbabweans, and thank you in honor of those who perished and who died and their families. We hope that this is going to give some kind of a solace, a catharsis, and a healing effect, so that they are able to live a happy life and we're able to stop violence once and for all. But may God bless you. Thank you very much, distinguished commissioners.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and members of the Commission. That was our last witness on the list for today. So I will end, if I may hand over to the Secretary.
I propose that
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.